Great. Well, thanks for joining me this morning. First, I'd like to find out how many here do portraits in stereo or just generally?
Just generally.
In stereo, okay. So what I'm hoping to do with today's session is to give you some tips and techniques that makes doing portraits in stereo more rewarding. We're going to look at some mistakes that are made. The reason that we have an uphill battle with stereo photography is that our mind is so ingrained in 2D. It's completely pervasive everywhere that when you think of a portrait, you automatically go to the 2D version of the portrait. And I'm going to show you today here some of the ways to make it better, the way for you to arrange your composition so that your 3D portraits come out much better. You cannot have a mindset of 2D photography and try to make it work with 3D techniques. It's just, all you're saying is, I took this 2D portrait with using a 3D camera. It's still a 2D portrait, okay? So, let me give you a little bit of background. This is the first issue that we did, and I was surprised, like we just completely shocked. Within about 2 months it sold out. Nothing has ever happened to that without any issues before. And it was simply because this is the up curve in the interest in stereophotography at that time. Then we went on to the second one here. This you'll notice has a Chris Schneeberger cover. And Chris has, we've used his work on 2 of the 4 issues. This is another one of his, has an excellent window image as a cover. And our latest, the last one we did was on the New Woman cover. Okay. This is the guide to photography. As I say, the reason that I designed this book, first of all, I was teaching school and the textbooks, I don't know if you ever look into it, the textbook at college level are anywhere from 150 on up for one textbook. And I had to tell students, poor students, you need to buy this book. And it's a real struggle for them. So I designed this guide to be economical. In fact, when it first came out, I was selling it for $10. And the students would say, well, I lost it. I'll buy another one. If they lost the other book, that was a big deal. So, and the other thing that I did, knowing what education of young people involves, I decided that every topic in the book had to be no more than 2 pages. That was it. If I can't catch the students' motivation and interest in 2 pages, it wasn't going to happen. In fact, it wasn't going to happen at all if I had like an 8-page exposition on how to do something. They simply just could not digest it. So everything is no more than 2 pages. There's a section there on how to make anaglyphs, 1 page. That's it. 8 steps. And the students would start off not knowing anything about stereophotography or anaglyphs, and I would coach them and say, well, try step 1. And they read step 1 and says, yeah, take left picture. Oh, I can do that. And step 2, take right picture. Oh, that's easy. Before you know it, they had 8 steps done, and they're all on their way to doing anaglyph. Very, very easy. Since this is a topic on portraiture, I've just lifted out here some of the sections in the book that deal with portraiture. And do we have a pointer that I want to point out a few things? So at the top left, you'll notice, thanks very much. At the top left, you'll notice there's a technique for starting portraiture. This is what you don't do. Straight on, shoulders square to the camera. And then we talk about angling the shoulders. That's the second frame there. And the next step, it's very important, is a head tilt. So it becomes you get very involved, but very simple. I can tell my students, here's what you have to be aware of when you're doing this. The head tilt, turns out there's a masculine head tilt and a feminine head tilt. And you have to be aware of that. On the right side there, placement of the hands. If you place the hands simply beside the body, the lines are going straight up and they miss the face. If you place the hands and the arms to make a triangle, the lines of interest will follow to the most important part of the picture, which is the face. And then, of course, different kinds of lenses and perspective. You can get somebody looking like a fish if you use a wide-angle lens. One thing in portraiture, as well as even in stereo portraiture, never use a flash on camera. It's just, you get terrible results. This particular picture here was done with just window light. And so you have to know the direction of light, and you have to get the nice, what's called, we're going to discuss later on, Rembrandt lighting, to give a nice rendition. This particular situation here, a man approached me and said, I know you know some photography, you know I'm having a terrible time, I can never get a good portrait of my wife. And I said, well, show me what you're doing. And he showed me how to flash on camera. I said, well, that's your problem right here, don't use the flash on camera. And so I took her by the window and positioned her, and ended up with the final picture there on the right. Classical lighting, again, all outdoors. This is very important there. You'll notice if you're doing outside, you must stand closer, you stand closer to the window than the subject is. That's how you're going to get the Rembrandt lighting. And then if possible, have somebody here with a reflector. It could be a bed sheet, something white, even a newspaper works. Okay? And this is the kind of result that you get. Okay? And then outdoor portrait lighting with natural light. Again, the positioning of the arms is very important, composition and location. This does not affect, this is not 3D photography yet. It's just still how to get good 2D portraits. Then there's the classical portrait lighting basics. One of them, of course, is Rembrandt lighting, which is very popular, and it tells you the positioning. It gives you the camera position, subject position, lighting position to get the results you have there. Studio lighting, again, will not, mention later on, will not work for stereo portraits. I would recommend more outdoor. And it's important also with silhouettes how much information can be attained. If you do something like this one here, no information at all. And be careful if you're doing silhouettes, somebody has long hair, it's going to end up looking like they have a beard. Okay. In 2 pages here, you got to mention 1 page, 1 subject, that's it. That's all you have to do. So on the left is some 4 steps how to get this dream glow effect. The small photograph shows you the before picture, then it shows you the after picture. And very popular, sometimes people like what's called a grunge look, techniques for doing that in Photoshop. And David Hockney technique, and also the one on the right, if you're doing any teaching, the students just love this. They just go to town on it. Well, can I make the eye bigger? Yeah, I think it's big. The idea here, though, is try to get a caricature. It's a type, a personality type. Okay, so much for that. The first, this issue here, stereo techniques, how to make stereo cards, how to make photograms. Again, 2 pages. I'm not asking you to read 20 pages how to make photograms. This particular issue here, I did an article on stereo photo maker, article on composition, and the Chris Schneerberger story. And the latest one here, the new woman, great photograms there too. And there's a photographer in Australia, very famous, who does wedding photography in stereo. Now, I did wedding photography for 10 years I worked for a studio, and I sold stereo wedding coverage. And what I found out was that about 50% of the couples said, yeah, not for me, too gimmicky. You know. The other 50% said, yeah, how much? And whatever price I gave them, they said, yeah, I want it. And I would sell 12, at that time it was 12 slides, $500. So I give them signing of the registry, cutting the cake, you know, the usual. And I gave them a set with the viewer, and they were thrilled as can be. So you can make a business out of doing stereo portraits, stereo photography. And you just have to let people know that that's what you do. Okay. Now I have these 3 sets here. It turns out I have one dinosaur issue. If you can see me later, we can make a deal. But these 3 sets here, I'm selling for $20. You can pick it up here after the talk or at the trade show. But wait, there's more. To get the guide for the deal. So that's a deal of the century. So anyway, see me later about that. We'll discuss. Okay. So this is a quote by Bowman Newhall. And this is where you really get the wow factor. I want people talk about the wow factor in stereo. That's what brings us all here anyway, right? We want to be able to get the wow factor in our pictures. And that's how do we do that with portraits? I did a talk years ago on 2D versus 3D, and this just summarizes some of the things in that talk. It turns out there are 7 items that give us depth clues. The stereo actually technique is only one of the 7. So if you want to just do stereo photographs and don't know about the other 6, you're missing out a lot of depth cues. So we have figure of ground, depth by overlapping. If one person, if I can see here this gentleman is overlapping the other person behind him, that means that the other person must be further away. Okay, so occlusion. Obliqueness, this is why the shoulders is turned in a diagonal position towards the camera. Linear perspective. Size constancy. We know that people are the same size. If I'm standing here and another person is standing at the end of the room, that they are visually the same size. But when you represent it in 2D, they're not the same size. The person further away is smaller. Okay, so that's interesting to know. Texture gradient. I try to include in all my stereo photographs the ground. The ground gives me a lot of texture. I know it doesn't give you head and shoulder. I don't want head and shoulder. I want to see a stereo effect. And binocular parallax is what the two lens camera does. Here's an interesting cartoon. The person is reading a book called The Laws of Perspective. And a figure approaches from the back here, starts walking towards him, and becomes the same size. He throws the book away, it says hogwash. Walks away and maintains the same size. Impossible. Impossible. Okay? There's another article in the 2007 issue. John Long did this article on aesthetics. Okay, this is about aesthetics of stereo. What's the reason for that we enjoy so much? And it turns out these things that he recognized. The frame versus the window. It's a moment in time. Passive versus active viewing. And with stereo, we get active viewing. We have simplicity versus complexity. My stereo photographs, I want them to be complex. I don't want anything simple. That's for 2D photography. And they are also take you into the frame, it involves immersion. Okay? This is a great example. You'll need the anaglyph glasses on. Krishnaberg cover, the window versus the frame. Excellent, excellent demonstration. Okay, searching for art. I'm going to look first at art samples. We'll look at photography samples of great portraits. And I'm learning from these samples, how can I apply this composition to my work? One of the earliest examples, Sandro Botticelli, 1483, Portrait of a Young Man. When this portrait was made, it was revolutionary. We don't think of it revolutionary today. Well, what's the big deal? Well, he showed the full frontal face of that. Before, people were showing either profile or three-quarter views. So interesting. Also notice in this particular picture, it's a portrait, head and shoulder portrait, no background, no depth at all. Okay. Most famous portrait of all, probably, ever painted, Leonardo da Vinci in 1503. That's basically 520 years ago. And the shoulder tilt, the positioning of the shoulder, the arms, the background gives you some depth to the picture. So we should learn from this and try to include a background image in our pictures. It turns out Leonardo never had any formal education. He was too poor, couldn't afford it. So everything he learned from his own wits. And he did have a business card. I tried to imagine what it might look like here. But he would hand people a business card, and on the card would simply be written, Discepolo dell'esperienza, which means disciple of experience. That's how he learned. That's how he learned it. And that's how we should learn from our experience in stereophotography. This particular painting here, I can still remember the emotional experience I had. This is in the Frick collection in New York City. If you ever have a chance to go to New York City, make a beeline to the Frick collection, and you're standing in front of this. I was standing in front of the experience that I had was that this is real. This person, I can touch him. So the lighting, everything was just, talk about a 3D experience. This is like 4D experience. It's amazing. Detail, the colors. Look at the stubble that's painted on the face. It's simply just mind-boggling. Then, of course, for portraits, you look at Rembrandt. You talk about the Rembrandt lighting. Rembrandt did a lot of self-portraits. In fact, I think the reason he did those was because people were willing to pay money for them. There's another one, and Portrait of a Young Woman. Beautiful example of Rembrandt lighting, where you see a triangular piece of triangular light on one side of the face. Vermeer is another example. Now, these two here I'm showing you here, the one on the left, I don't think would make a very good 3D portrait sample. The one on the right would. Lots of activity, it's complex, things are happening, she's doing something with her hands, she's pouring some milk, there's things on the table, there's things in the background. So if I had to choose which one to make 3D, that's the posing I would use, the one on the right. This is another great one that I saw from how to position groups. Now, if you're looking at this painting here, and you see the positioning of the groups, it looks and feels very natural. It doesn't look even posed. This is, somebody could say, that's what I saw, that's what they were. And that's what I want to represent. Here's another one by Degas, would be excellent stereo composition. You'll notice the size constancy. The figure on the front is way larger. The people in the background, that gives you your depth clues. The person there must be closer, the other people must be further away. And here's one with excellent texture gradient. The floor, you'll notice here is, there's lots of texture here, but as you get further away, texture does not become important. Okay, and here's another group shot. Now, if I was at this scene here and said, I want to take a picture of you, everybody would line up. And I said, no, that's not what I saw. I saw this activity, I photographed it. That is where the real 3D effect comes in. Probably the most famous photographer in the 1800s was Nadar in Paris. And it was said that if you had a letter you wanted to send to Nadar, and you simply put on the envelope Nadar, it would get to him. That's how famous he was. One of his most famous shots was the one of Sarah Barnhart. This was probably one of the first social media stars of the time. August Sander is one of the people that I look to for sort of ideas. He was not a 3D photographer, but in terms of what he was trying to do is it resonates with me in terms of what I want to do with my 3D photography work. And if we can create portraits of subjects that are true, we thereby in effect create a mirror of the times. And what he did was he wanted to photograph professions or people of the 20th century. And this is one of his most famous pictures. Again, I'm trying to envisage what happened prior to him meeting these people. It seems like a candid shot. It doesn't seem posed. They're on their way to a dance or somewhere. And the posing and composition is perfect. Here's another one, not a great, could be 3D, not great 3D because they're all standing beside each other, but I want to point out from this picture here the construct that we have in our mind of portrait, asking somebody to be photographed. I am sure, I am certain, August Sander was not walking by and saw these people standing like that right there. He had to approach them and say, do you mind if I take your picture? And said, yeah, sure. And this is how he set them up. Okay? So this particular photograph is a construct. It's a fabrication, as it were, of reality. This is not reality. Yes, it's reality. That's who the people were, but in terms of the posing, it's a construct of a 2D photography. He was a great portrait photographer. On the left, I think it's some famous person. On the right, it's called a pastry cook. And from the samples here, lessons that I learned, if you're doing portraits of people, hands are very difficult. Give them something in their hand. Give them something to do. Okay. So, and this is one that I thought would be playing cards. Excellent composition. You saw the one before that I showed you of the artwork. Excellent composition, and again, it's reality. This is what was happening right there. I didn't ask them to move, nothing. This would make excellent 3D photograph, 3D portrait of a group. One of the most famous photographs of the last century was Joseph Karsh, portrait of Winston Churchill. And interesting story behind this. Winston Churchill, this is just after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Winston Churchill was coming to the United States, and by way of the United States, he stopped in to give a speech at Canadian Parliament. And Joseph Karsh was told, you can take one picture. That's it. He's busy. You are allowed one picture. So the portrait photographer that he was, he went there the night before, set up his lights, had a person act as Winston Churchill, so he knew where to stand, everything. He didn't have much time. Everything had to be prearranged, and then take the picture. The famous speech that he gave was the speech where generals were telling England will have its neck wrung like a chicken in 2 weeks. And Winston Churchill replied, some chicken. And very long pose. You got to hear the original of it. Very long pause. It's some neck. And when he came to this picture after the speech, he walked down a corridor. He was smoking a cigar. Very politely, he says, Joseph Karsh went up to him, couldn't have him smoking a cigar, took the cigar from his mouth, went back to the camera, and this is a scowl that he saw. He snapped the picture. And this is the picture that made Karsh world famous. Also, I think, gave background to the war effort in England. And it turned out, although he said you can only take one picture, he calmed down a bit and he said, you know what, you can take another picture. So this one you never see. Yeah. Can you imagine publishing this during wartime? You just forget it. It would never happen. So that's the one you send sort of to the wife or to the children or whatever. Okay. I thought, okay, what would be a good place to search for portraits? Well, we have a National Portrait Gallery in Washington. They should have a lot of portraits there. And they do. They have lots and lots and lots and lots. Stereo portraits, you got to really search for those. So this is one of, you can use some of these I convert to anaglyphs. Booker T. Washington and designated guests. So it's a stereo card, but in terms of the posing, it's a 2D posing. It's a football team. It's a junior league. It's not a 3D posing. Okay? This is again another one. What, you're wasting your time. You know, it's a 3D portrait, and you're lining them up like, you know, like a baseball team. There's no depth to it at all. It just is not. I don't know what they're thinking, but I guess they had a 3D camera. It's better than nothing. This, I would start getting into some complexity now. In his desk in the White House, lots of things happening, lots of things to explore. So it makes for a good portrait. Same thing here, cabinet room. And this one here, show you what you find. It's head and shoulder shot, no background. You can look at it yourself in 3D. It's just, to me, I don't see the wow factor. It's just not there. So I try to avoid portraits like this in 3D. This is one, it's a 2D picture, but this is the one they have to get in 3D. They never did. This would give you a wow factor if you could have this photograph here in 3D. It's a photograph of this cabinet, and the sense that I get when I see this in 3D or even in 2D is, this is what actually happened. This is what I saw, what I witnessed. Okay? They're not posting a bench outside. I didn't walk along the yard and next to the White House there, and all of a sudden I see these people sitting on a bench lining up. It never happens. Okay? Now, this is the one that's really, for us, maybe easier to understand, but you have to wrap your head around, and I on purpose made single emphasize that 2D is seen from a single lens position. Okay? And it really is so pervasive that we don't even think about it anymore. So here's what's happening. And you say, wait a minute, my mind still, I haven't processed this yet. What's going on here? This is not possible. Okay? The reason this is possible, the reason you get a picture like this is because we have only one eye, a single lens that's taking this picture from a preferred position. And that position is very, very precise. Because if you step aside a little bit, that's what you're actually looking at. Okay? So keep that in mind whenever you're photographing. If you're using a 2D camera or you're using a 3D camera from a single position, you're going to get strange things happening. And this is kind of, your brain says, wait a minute, something's wrong here. My mind is playing with me. Okay, so single position, single lens. Now I'm looking at portraits. Okay, portraits. What's a portrait? So we try to see what's around here. I've taken some samples. Is this a portrait? Anybody recognize the gentleman? Al Capone, yeah. Taken from the Miami Police Department. So you say, well, yeah, it's identification. Okay, we don't say it's a portrait. It serves a purpose. Identifies who he is. Side view, profile view, headshot. And I took this quote from a Bernice Abbott book, A Guide to Better Photography. And her opinion is, the portrait has three things I'm looking for. A good likeness, it has to show character, and spontaneity. I'm sure you agree the one of Winston Churchill qualifies under all three aspects there. This one I love because of spontaneity. The general's wife, a friend of mine took this. And the expression, the candidness, spontaneity is all there. Another friend of mine has a portrait studio. So this is your traditional 2D portrait studio. What does she photograph? She photographs glamour shots. The one in the violet color is a former mayor, now recently passed away, politicians, businessmen, even pets, photography. So she has a studio, and people go to her studio to have a portrait taken. Okay? This is a sample of a portrait that's done with the family, and it's a great 2D picture. It's done in the studio. There's no depth. There's nothing in the background. How many here have gone through when they do a portrait session like this? Okay, I don't know if you have. I did myself with my family. I look back at the picture 10 years later, and my kids are saying, "Dad, we were such geeks." What were you thinking when you posted it like that? So I'm thinking to myself as a portrait photographer, how would I handle that situation of I've got this family? Well, one thought that I had was, it's a lot more work, of course, but I would say, you know, what do you like doing as a family? Oh, we like baking things in the kitchen. Great, great. You know, next session we're going to do in your kitchen. We're going to have you making a cake or making dinner, and I'll photograph you there in 3D, because that's what actually happened. The construct of having this portrait taken, it's identification. It shows you what you look like at that time. To me, there is no emotional content. There is no emotional engagement. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you some sample of student portraits. This is students that I taught. They're college students. Never had a camera in their hand, most of them. Never had a camera in their hand before. And I'm teaching them lighting, exposure, composition, how to pose the shoulder, the arm, so on. No hands in the picture. Hands, I tell them, if you want to learn hands, that's graduate work. So, no hands. And the picture has to have an expression or emotional content, engagement. Why is that? Because every time you take a portrait of somebody, you're communicating with that person. I only had one case. It was a child from hell who I had to photograph, and no emotional engagement. She would not cooperate. The mother was, I'm paying big bucks for this. Pay attention, smile. And that made things worse. So you have to have that engagement. The sitter and the photographer have to communicate, have to have some sort of rapport. Okay? Student photograph, 18-year-old kid, never had a camera in their hand. This is what they produce. Okay? That composition, lighting, emotional engagement. Okay? So these are all student work. And then I'll show you some of this. A job that I had was the school wanted to have a brochure to highlight the graduates. And these are the future chefs. So some of them, these are all 2D, of course, they're using the publication. But some of them, the one on the right would make a great 3D picture and be a great cover for their first cookbook. Okay, no background, keep it simple. But all emotional engagement, they're all happy to be there, they're graduating, they're going to have their degree and whatnot. And this is the one I would use as my stereo portrait. Lots of activity, good foreground, interesting background, in location where that's their environment, they're in a restaurant. And so I would think about that and say, okay, this would make a great 3D. Now these you'll need your glasses. This is what you find if you do a head and shoulder shot, portrait, no background, no depth. To me, does not have the wow factor. Here's some, this is from my collection here, so I try to find portraits, papayas. A little bit too busy with too many people going around. It's not really a portrait of himself, it's more an event. Works, no, not bad, not bad. This is probably one of the best ones I have in terms of depth. Has lots of activity, oblique angles, so background there's depth in the background, there's items in the foreground, does not look posed. This is something that I would see him doing every day, going to his desk. That's a good record. This is from classic shot of No Place Like Home, but right now these days, I don't know where you find that anywhere. And this is a story that I tell. I saw these people walking the dog just like that. That's exactly how they were. I turned the car around, stopped, started a conversation with them and said, this is what I'm doing. And well, do you mind if I take your picture? And they said, oh, not at all. And they all lined up beside each other. And I said, wait, whoa, hold it. That's not what I want. That's not what I saw. Can you please go back to where you were when you were walking your dog on the sidewalk. And that's what I took. That's a picture that I think to me has good depth. The same happened with this couple here. You know, they were on a road trip across Canada. I said, can I take your picture? Sure, no problem. That's what people, when you say take my picture, that's what they want, that's what they expect. They get beside you. They don't know that you're taking a stereo picture. So, and it comes a very good stereo portrait, but also it's a good 2D portrait as well. And then I tried, from my involvement, my interest in August Sander, I did a project on the area of the city called the Junction, which is up and coming area. And I wanted to photograph all of the professions, the people, the store owners, what they do there. And I'm thinking of this as a person who does bicycle repair, has a shop. So if I showed him with the white backdrop in a studio, it wouldn't say bicycle repairman. So I have him in his environment, bicycle complexity galore, and this is what the profession is. It gave me the idea of photographing other professions, and one idea that I just had recently was, why don't we photograph, there are professions that are, let's say, what's the word? Professions that are not maybe going to be around, or maybe don't exist anymore. And I don't have a picture of that. I don't have a picture of the elevator operator. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember that. I don't have a picture of the person in the VHS rental store. They don't exist anymore.
He's going to do that same thing.
Okay. What's going to happen next? Are they going to be the cashier going to be next? Become obsolete? So we should take pictures of these people. Winter scene, good depth, neighbor,
No, I get it.
candid shots on the street, street photography. That is something where you find lots of material. And people are really very generous. If you just be honest with them, tell them what they're doing, what you're doing. And one technique that I found with strangers that works is don't ask for their email. Don't do that. People get very defensive. Well, I don't know, my privacy, I don't want to. What I do is instead I give them my email. I said, look, I took a nice picture of you. Here's my email address. You know, when you get home, if you decide you want a copy of it, send me a note and I'll send you a digital copy. And when they do that, I have their email address. But it was their initiation. It wasn't something I asked them up front. This is a machine shop that's been in Toronto for maybe 50, 60 years or more. Michael Ferrier, he owns the shop. So I documented that. Some of the workers in the shop. Again, great 3D effect because of the background that's actual real life. Restaurateurs, they open up a new, that's always happening a lot. This is interesting too, I saw these bicyclists. Not at great depth, but I noticed the oblique angle of positioning, so I do have background that recedes. And they're very nice about it. Everybody loves being photographed, let me tell you. If you say, I want to take a photograph, you're giving them a compliment. And then I said, you know, if you do me a favor, I'd like to take a picture of you in action. And they said, oh, no problem at all, what do you want us to do? I said, here's what I want you to do. So I had them run, they did this 2 or 3 times for me, but I got the shot that I liked. Again, very generous. You know, you ask, if you don't ask, you don't get. This is another, it's gone by the history books now. He had been in this position, tailor shoes, for maybe 100 years, maybe. It's one of the original shoe stores that you don't see anymore. And I photographed from outside the store, I photographed inside. It's the one shoe store that I've never seen anywhere else now. They have the shoes, they used to have the shoes along the shelves, on the wall. And again, it's like a museum piece. And making pizza, you'll find that everywhere. We have some renovations done. What are the professions involved in renovation? You get plumbers. I tried to do something I said with, I always get feet in the picture. So, and again, it's just another profession. Kids, babies, It's hit and miss. You're not going to pose them. Let me tell you, don't even try. Just observe, watch what they do, and you might take 10, 12 shots and get nothing. Next day you get 2 or 3 shots and you get some beautiful samples. Okay. Visiting a lumber yard. Again, I have the camera with me. You know, do you mind posing? No, not at all. What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to stand it? So you're getting great shots like this. This was at a camera trade. Interesting enough, this was only done about a couple of weeks ago. The person here was selling darkroom equipment. And he was having booming time. People were just unbelievable. I don't know the resurgence or what it is, but he was selling balls for chemicals, selling outdated film, darkroom lights, darkroom timers, unbelievable. So the same thing happened with him. So I asked him, you mind if I take your picture? No, not at all. I said, here's my email address. Fine, I took it down. I gave him a magazine, has the email address on there. And just the last week I got an email from him that says, well, remember me, Todd is my name. You took my picture. I'd like a copy of it. Sure, no problem. Send it off to him. Now, I'm not publishing anymore, but if I had to use this picture in a publication, I have his contact information. I say, you know, by the way, I'm going to be using a magazine. Do I have your permission to use it? Yes, you do. No, you don't. Whatever. But I have contact with him. And this is a group shot that I did of the Photographic Historical Society. Again, this is not posed. This is what they were sitting around a table just like that. Has great depth. Size constancy is there. People closer are larger than the people behind there. And it feels like natural way to do it. And this is the way I think stereo photography should be done. Not in a studio, but natural observation. Okay, it's our mind does strange things, and it fills in a lot of things. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. People won't notice it. Their mind will fill in, and that's it. I had a copy of one issue. An issue of the magazine that I was going to hand out for free. Unfortunately, I left it in the trade show. So if you want to come by the trade show there and say, do you have a copy of the free issue? That issue has some sections on street photography, which you might be interested in. Yeah.
What camera do you use?
I use the Fuji camera.
Yeah, because otherwise it scares people, right? 2 cameras that would drive.
No, I know. You know what happened with that? I had once a 2-camera section. I was photographing in Toronto at the outdoor section. It's called a TD Center, where they have some statues on the grass. And let me tell you, within less than a minute, I was surrounded by 3 officers with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What are you doing? What are you doing? I said, well, I'm just photographing. Well, you can't do that. You know, I said, I'm a tourist. I didn't tell them I live in Toronto. I said, I'm a tourist. I've seen other people with cameras photograph. I said, well, you can't photograph here. This is public. This is private property. I said, everybody else is photographing here. Come here. Let me show you. So they came over. I took the camera that was a 2D rig, and I pressed on so they could see the image in the back. And oh, that's a camera. Because they thought I was satellite control with the satellite, or getting GPS positioning for a strike with a bomb.
Yeah, I couldn't take a twin rig up into the Arc de Triomphe. So I went back downstairs, grabbed my wife's realist, which has 2 lenses, took it up, no problem.
The Fuji, no problem at all. It's a digital camera.
You think it's a phone?
Yeah, I know. So once they saw that, the other thing was privacy. I was photographing a statue, and the security guard, like everybody's security conscious, and I don't blame it. You can't photograph here. So well, it's public land, private property. There's a difference there. So I went to the sidewalk and I photographed from there, but not on their property. Anyway, thank you very much. I want to get a copy of the. I have some here. And again, the free copy, come and see me in the trade show.
Now that we have had the rice, the flowers, the nuts, is time. Why, I can visualize such happy hours close by your side. The honeymoon in store is one that you'll adore. I'm gonna take you for a ride. I'll go home and pack my clothes. You go get your these and those, and away we'll go. On off we're gonna shuffle, shuffle off to Buffalo. To Niagara in a sleeper, there's no honeymoon that's cheaper, and the train goes slow. On off we're gonna shuffle, shuffle off to Buffalo. Someday the stork may pay a visit and leave a little souvenir, just a little cute. What is it? But we'll discuss that later, dear. For a little silver quarter, we can have the Pullman porter turn the lights down low. On off we're gonna shuffle, shuffle off to Buffalo.